Welcome to Nachtwaffen Pilot with Penny Bradley, and today we are having a special. We're calling it the Stargate Roundtable, and y'all will find out as we go why. Both of my guests are returning, and most of y'all know who they are, Matt Tracy and Joseph Powell. And we all serve on a ship together in Nachtwaffen. So it's like we've known each other forever is how it feels.
Pretty much.
So the topic today we wanted to talk about was they were having memories of where the device came from that was used at Montauk. I don't remember a portal there other than what I opened with the chair. So if whichever one of you wants to start this, tell the history of where this thing came from and that.
Well, just to correct some things, the chair was given to us by the Germans in 1953. The portal tech that we're referring to as the Stargate project was actually found. It's an ancient tech that was found on Mars and was brought to Earth using the portal generating ability of the chair at Montauk, and then was moved through time to 1953 and was placed in the facility at Cheyenne Mountain. And this is basically loosely what the movies and TV series are all based on. But the portal generator, it looked nothing like what's in the movie. It was a giant football field-sized room, lots of stone objects, obelisks and whatnot. And when you turn the thing on, a bubble-like sphere formed in the center of the room. And you could walk through it. It was a really weird feeling walking through it. It was like astral projecting, like having an out-of-body experience. You feel like your body's falling away while at the same time your body's disintegrating. But it's not a painful feeling. And then on the other end, the opposite occurs.
I don't have any memory of this, so I'm not sure I was even introduced to this device. So I was there in the winter of 61, 62. So
that was Montauk. Once the device was moved to Cheyenne Mountain, it was no longer, we didn't even know it when our alters at Montauk didn't even know the Stargate program existed, the Stargate project. They called it the Stargate project.
To separate it from the remote viewing program?
I guess. We didn't know it existed, and yet we have alters that also worked there.
Okay. So this, for my viewers, the folks listening, this is a completely new to the public program you're describing.
Right. It actually started, we were doing some memory recall and focusing on something that popped up in my memory. I remember wearing old school army fatigues, like the solid green that they wore in the late 40s and early 50s.
Some of the projects still wore those into the 60s.
Well, I remember this big tunnel on the side of this mountain. And I remember going into the tunnel, and then off to the right side, there was a smaller tunnel that went offshoot and actually did like a corkscrew down to this railway tunnel, and it had railway tracks, and it was wide enough to where you could also walk on the side by the walls and also run like golf carts. And I remember somebody waiting for me there, and we continued down like this corkscrew type of motion down. It wasn't. It was a very what's the word I'm looking for? The corkscrew travel was something that a train could do. It wasn't like a thing of stairs.
It wasn't tight.
Exactly. It was very, yeah.
Okay, so it was a more open path.
You're right, but you could tell that you're going at a down slant and slightly to the left, and this kind of motion. So it felt like overall a corkscrew. And we stopped. The railway tracks could continued on, but we stopped at what was almost like a subway station type of platform. And I got off the golf cart, and I go into this opening, which is this giant safe door, which is just like the door up top in the publicized facility.
Okay. So
And
it's a blast door.
yeah, big giant blast door, but it leads into this small room. You walk through the blast door opening, and you're in this room. There's another blast door right in front of you, and the blast door behind you closes. And off to your right, there's this glassed-in security guard room, and there's these guys with white helmets and solid army green fatigues. They have a leather belt on them, and there's a weapon pouch on them, but you can't see the weapon. It's like a flap fully covered. There was two guys in the room. It looked that way. And then they decide if you get to go in through the other door. If they don't like you, knockout gas gets pumped into the room.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. But they opened the second blast door, and right in front of me is a desk with another security guy dressed out just like the others. And he's sitting at this desk and hands me a clipboard, and I'm signing in. And right there next to the desk is Joseph. He's standing there waiting for me.
Yeah, I was wondering when he would come in.
And then we go off to the left side of the desk from where I entered in. There's a tunnel pathway. You could go to the right or to the left, and we went to the left. And there were piping and conduit on the ceilings. It was wide enough that 3 or 4 people could walk side by side.
Okay.
I remember a ways turning to the right. It was like a T-junction where that pathway, you could go left or right. We went to the right. And I know My altar there is Michael. This is my altar, Michael.
Okay. You've mentioned privately that you've been doing some work and have separated a lot of your memories. So
I discovered that memory that when I was living in the camper, of that reptilian woman coming in and calling me Michael, and that whole memory seems to have been a screen memory of some sort. For some reason I haven't figured out yet, but it seems to have been a screen memory. Michael, my altar that is named Michael.
I want to make a point for our audience. Most people in these programs have screen memories on at least part of their memories, so that they think one thing happened, but when you get beyond that screen memory, it's usually something completely different.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that you really have to watch for. And when I get a new memory pop up, I do self-hypnosis and I ask my subconscious to pull away the curtains and show me what really happened. I don't erase the cover memory. I just pull it aside to see what really happened. And then I work with that memory instead of the cover. But it's really, really, really common. So a lot of people, if you're going with your memories from dreams, or if you're going from your surface memory of what pops up, you may be going down the wrong path. So this is something, this is one of the things you really have to watch for.
If you're not testing each and every memory, I have memories that later on became, I noticed were screen memories that I believed at first were real. I ran tests to see if they were screen memories, and
what kind of tests are you running?
just meditation. I really anchor myself into the moment, and I focus on every sensory perception until it kind of floats away, and then what was behind it pops up, because screen memories are not as vivid and detailed as the real memory.
That's true. So you were talking about that this was your alter, Michael.
Right. I do have, it turns out I have multiple altars that serve in the Draco Empire, but the one that is named Michael was actually part of this program, the Stargate project. And may be an offshoot altar of George, who worked at Montauk.
That's something the public doesn't understand, is when they create one altar, they train it, and then they can create other altars off it, and they will have that same training.
Correct.
So just because you've already got one altar made doesn't mean that's the end of the story.
My altar, Michael, seems to have the same abilities and training as my altar that was trained at Montauk. And my Montauk altar is George. We could go into him a little later. I have no recall of being at Montauk, but Joseph remembers some things that, some more details that I don't. So I'll let him get into it.
Yeah,
Sure.
you don't
Okay.
get to sit there and be quiet.
I was doing so well. Oh,
Fly on the wall.
so as I've been going through this with the Montauk stuff, this is how we kind of tripped into the Stargate project, right? And the Montauk program wasn't even called that. It was called the Phoenix Project. And the Stargate project is a branch off of the Phoenix Project. So once we learned how to do time travel and stuff like that, and we're able to teleport, that's what we used to get to the equipment. And what had happened is roughly basically from what I've come through is that around I think it was 1985, shortly after I had taken over, one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Air Force, his name is Richard Bowman Myers. I'd been in contact with him. And this is when the Air Force started financing us, because originally we were being financed by the Army.
That's really common in these projects. For about every 10 years, who funds them changes.
Yeah, and basically what had occurred is that they never told us what we were doing. All he basically did was ask me to send him people. So I started sending pretty much everybody that was there with me from Montauk after I'd taken over. And I mean, it got to the point where we didn't have very many people on staff at Montauk. And that kind of freaked Jimmy out. But Jimmy didn't know what they were doing with him. But what had occurred is that the people from Montauk were basically being taken back in time to some weren't being taken back to 1953. Most of them were being taken back later on. I know that my alter Johnny was started there in 1953. Now, my alter Jimmy and Johnny were both clones. We were both in clone bodies. We weren't in our original bodies. And if you go and you watch the Stargate program, on TV and stuff, there's one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I think he's in one of the episodes. His name is Michael Edward Ryan.
Yeah, I
Okay.
remember him.
He was actually there.
I have been rewatching Stargate 1 because I now have context for it. First time I watched it, it was just entertainment. And now it's like, okay, there's an awful lot of drip, drip, drip disclosure there. And so I've been identifying the disclosure parts.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot more disclosure in there than people realize.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he was actually there at the Cheyenne facility, but the other individual I mentioned was actually the head of it at the time. And he's not even from that time. He traveled back, he went back in time and served. He does have alters, but that individual that was running that project never had his memories erased of that project. Okay. So he remembers that project. What had happened was after a certain point in time, when Jimmy was sending these people back, he also was ordered to send the AI that was at Montauk back there too. So
how did that go?
Basically,
the AI was the one that ordered it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jimmy basically followed the orders of the AI, and that happened in 1996. So in 1996.
Okay, I'm going to insert something here. There were a lot of things that happened in 94, 95, 96 in a lot of different projects. So I'm going to relate that AI going back in time to being part of this. Eric Hecker has identified that 95 was the point at which these agencies stopped using remote viewing and started using the more computer-oriented looking glass technologies. that that was the time point at which that changed, because he was tracking the other Stargate, the one that was remote viewing. And so that point in time is somewhere that if you notice things happening then, you kind of need to take note of that and maybe track them, because at some point we're going to find out why they changed from people doing things to computers doing things.
So, like I had originally said in past interviews, this AI was the one running the Phoenix project, and this same AI is the one that was running the Stargate project.
Okay.
Okay, and what's quite interesting is that two movies and a TV series came off of the Cheyenne Mountain. The first one was a war game
Mm-hmm.
where you had a kid stumble into
And AI.
NORAD and went up against an AI. So from what I remember when I was there as Johnny, is that I had interactions with this individual that was the chief of staff of the Air Force that was running the project, and we would have back and forth. And I remember him wanting to put a leash on the AI, but he had no choice. He had to work for it, basically. As I've been sifting through these memories and going through, because I've been stumbling into a lot of false memories,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to Montauk. I've even had false memories that Jimmy had implanted while he was at Montauk on purpose. So this is basically what I've come to remember. I remember the room that he was talking about, where the Stargate was, and the ball that basically expands. It expands out, and then you basically walk through it. I don't remember very many missions. I don't remember actually any missions off planet yet, because it's still new memory to me. I do remember, as he was remembering it, I was remembering seeing him and waiting for him at that entrance area. I do remember talking with him, talking with his alter, Michael. I remember arguing with the head of the project a lot, because what we've come to find out, both of us, is that we were less orderly,
Discipline.
and we didn't have very much discipline, and he hated that. He was used to people going, yes sir, no sir.
He was used to people spit shining their boots and that kind of thing. And
Montauk kids don't do that.
we weren't like that.
Yeah. And
Montauk
it's like,
kids are not like that.
so like Johnny and Michael, they didn't even know about Montauk. So it's kind of awkward where, like, I had one altar sending people from Montauk, and they were activating their altars when they got to Cheyenne Mountain. And then I had an altar in Cheyenne Mountain that had no idea about Montauk. That altar that was at the altar Johnny that was at Cheyenne Mountain. He started in 1953, and his service there ended between 1978 and 1983.
That's a long time.
Yeah. I haven't quite narrowed that down yet.
I know I was there for 17 years. We haven't narrowed down exactly which years those were.
Yeah.
Okay.
So from what we've found is that I was a part, the unit was called SG. They were SG units. From what we found out is that I was a part of the first one, and Matt's alter, Michael, was a part of the fifth unit. There was a whole bunch of different units too. So I don't really remember yet who was a part of my unit at this point, but I do know that I did have interactions with him.
I remember playing chess with you in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Mess hall. Mess hall.
Whatever.
Yeah. That's all. Yeah.
It was Air Force. It's mess hall.
When it was Montauk, we called it we just called it a cafeteria at Montauk. So that's kind of what I got used to saying.
So I find that interesting how that occurred. I think they had different branches there too. Like it wasn't just
Definitely.
one branch.
There was a Marine who was over us, giving us orders. I remember him.
Most bases have folks from different branches. That seems to be a common thread. I know that Lou, when he was in Vietnam, he worked for DOD, and he would go through and there would be officers of various branches. Where's your salute, soldier? And he'd find himself in the brig, and he'd give him his boss's phone number. And pretty soon they would be coming back and saying, sorry, sir.
Yep.
Yeah. When he left, they cleared the files, but there are people who,
That's common for DOD.
yeah, it was really common then. I had the NSA team that activated me looked through the files to see if they could find him even under his code name, and they couldn't. So we were like, whew, he's clean. But he was involved with some really nasty stuff that is still top secret to this day. So if he ever writes a book, we're going to be in trouble.
So
wait till the day, wait to publish it till the day just before, he's ready to leave this earth.
Yeah, make it one of those posthumous things.
Right.
You can't publish it till I'm dead.
There you go. Put it in the will.
Yeah. So,
so
but yeah, there's most bases have more than one sitting there. It's like the government thinks, well, we own this property, we might as well have everybody there.
yeah. Well, I even remember even in the Phoenix project, there was a Air Force liaison that worked along with Preston. They brought in a guy that Matt remembers, his older George remembered, and he trained in Japan, from what I remember, and he was in the Air Force.
Yeah. This guy trained in Japanese arts on his free time. This was just one of his hobbies. He was in the Air Force. He was in Japan for several years, and during that time, he studied jiu-jitsu and Japanese jiu-jitsu and judo, kendo, kenjutsu, karate.
So he was potentially dangerous.
He also studied some of the ninjutsu arts that survived. And this was his after work hours hobby. And when they found out, they brought him to Camp Hero to teach us.
Yeah, well, it was quite interesting because the way that whole thing unfolded was I remember having an argument with Preston when I was Jimmy, and it's like all we ever trained in was Excrema, so we would be sitting there training nonstop, and we were all really good at it. But it was like I got in an argument with him, and I was like, can't we learn something else? And I remember like my alter knew different stuff from outside. he knew about Muay Thai. And I remember wanting to have somebody train us in Muay Thai. And they were like, oh, no, and what they did is instead of that, they brought in this guy from the Air Force and brought him to teach us his stuff, right? And when they did that, the day he was supposed to show up, I gathered everybody together in the training room, and we basically started training in Excrema just to show what our capabilities were. And when this guy came in and watched what we were doing, his jaw like dropped. He didn't even understand why
he was like a deer in the headlights.
Because you just saw like all of us and like we were just going at it. And I mean, like not holding back, because we were used to beating each other to a bloody pulp. And I remember facing off with him after the fact later on, just one-on-one, to try to understand what his fighting style was. And he had one attack basically, and he made sure to let me know that he wanted to use his actual sword. And all I had was my sticks.
He was that scared of Joe. Like the teacher was scared of us.
And
well, you guys went up against Junior, so I can see him being a little intimidated.
Our training consisted of no holds barred, full contact, full force pressure testing. They didn't care if we got injured or even killed. They would just throw us in regen.
Oh, you had regen then, because when I was at Montauk, they didn't.
We had some sort of regeneration. All I know is death was not an option.
Yeah, that's.
It was either that or they would just throw us back into in another clone body, because I know we were in clone bodies.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was Matt's alter got really good at his fighting style. He studied it like really hardcore, as a matter of fact. Like he was one of the best ones that we had there that studied his art. But it's just interesting because, like I even remember just mundane arguments, even without Bielik. I remember arguing with him because the sticks that we would get were just regular wooden sticks. They weren't even the proper equipment, and they would break a lot, and they would get pissed because we would break the sticks, and it's like, you're giving us the wrong equipment. And and they would get it from a wood yard, and I think it's somewhere in Montauk.
They were trying to save money.
Yeah, and I even, like, I argued with them. I was like, you really have to change this up, because if you don't want your equipment breaking, we need to get better stuff so there's less problems. Our equipment will last longer.
Better quality lasts longer and saves money down the road.
Yeah, it does.
And I remember going to that yard with Al Bielik and like getting in an argument with the guy that ran that yard, because I was like, your sticks are crap. Like,
I can see you doing that. Yes.
So it's just that was more of the mundane stuff. There's been a lot more different memories that have come back, dealing with that project that are not fun at all. Like
some intense shit.
Yeah. I don't know. Matt can probably tell you some more stuff.
So how many trips did you take through the Stargate at Cheyenne Mountain?
That I don't know. I don't know how often we went through. I know I was there for 17 years. I do remember one trip. I remember that same time that Joseph's alter Johnny met me at the door. I remember Michael and Johnny were good friends. He didn't have to meet me at the entrance. He was just there, and he was briefing me on whatever was going on. There was a mission that I was called in for. I must have been living off base somehow, somewhere.
Colorado Springs is nearby.
Yeah. I remember going into the control room, which was very much old school analog.
Well, yeah, in 53, everything was analog.
It was a giant, huge window looking out into the giant room that housed the device. And I mean, it was almost like reminiscent of the Houston facility that worked with NASA that
Well, that was only a decade later.
the room's layout was kind of like that, is what I'm referring to.
Okay, were there tubes that you could see?
No,
They
it
had
was
steady state?
it was keyboards and CRT screens at rows of controls. You couldn't actually see the computers.
Okay.
The computers were not in the room. It was keyboards and other switches at a control station that you sat at, and you had one or more CRT screens in front of you, and there was maybe 100 of these stations in a leveled setup. So
Tiered.
yeah. There were stairs in the center and on the sides. And then instead of a giant TV monitor on the front wall that everything was facing, it was a giant window that viewed into the big room that housed the device.
Okay. So
Going
the
up
computer
the,
itself would have had to have been in a refrigerated room because
it was in a
because
room all its own that I never saw, or at least I don't
it
remember
would have
yet.
had to have been refrigerated to
Yeah.
keep the tubes from overheating.
Right. But those tubes, the actual processing equipment was not in that room.
Yeah, okay.
I remember going upstairs, down the center aisle of stairs, and we get up to the platform, and it's like you can go to the right, and there is a meeting room with a big giant table and chairs, and you go to the left, and there's the commanding officer's office. And
You know what's really funny about those computers?
Mm.
Your cell phone has more memory.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. Basic calculators today have more memory.
Yeah.
But I remember glancing off, and there were people and paper everywhere, and drawing boards, and they were doing something I didn't know at first. But we went off to the left into the office, and we were briefed on our mission, which was to acquire some kind of technology. Apparently, the guys that were in the meeting room were the team that did the reconnaissance. They were the reconnaissance team that went before us, and were literally drawing out maps from memory on the entire layout, and were laying the groundwork on the next mission you know, giving the guys that were going to go in next, us, as much as they could. We had, I remember 2 teams going in. It was Joe's team and my team both went in, and each team was 6 members.
Do you know which planet you went to?
No, but I know that when I looked back, after we exited the portal, I looked back and all I saw was the bubble on that end. There was no second device like they do in the movies and the shows. You could open that bubble anywhere in the universe. And it was a two-way, two-way street.
So the whole time it was open, then anything there could come through.
Yes. There were different ways of handling safety at the facility. The room that it was housed in was shielded, radiation shielded, impact shielded. It could take a nuclear explosion inside the room and not damage the rest of the facility. There were also huge cannons on turrets that were automated. And we're talking like artillery cannons that came in from the ceiling, dropped down from the ceiling, like
Just
185s. Like,
I remember that.
we're talking about like 185 stationary artillery cannons that were modded out to put on a turret that came down from the ceiling. And other smaller artillery equipment. I remember that there were times when we would set a time frame and we would set our watches. They would close the bubble and they would reopen the bubble at that time. There were other times where they would just leave it open for the duration of the mission. Depended on the mission, it depended on the terrain and the opposition.
And local wildlife.
Yeah.
That's important because some of these planets have wildlife that the Earth population is not told about.
We also had mobile tank-like artillery that we could push through the bubble, and it would guard the bubble on the other end.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. I actually remember a mission where Will and Theodore was there, Ted, and several other people.
That's Will Glover and
Yep.
Ted Alexander.
Yes.
Yes, I know these guys.
Well, years ago, when Ted first introduced himself to me, I actually met Ted first, and then
So
Will
did I,
later.
That's
And then Will later, and they both told me the same story about this actual event, and we didn't know what program it was. They both remembered me grabbing a tank. There was enemy fire. I grabbed a tank and threw it in the air, and it landed right in front of Will and Ted for them to use as cover. And
you didn't break anything
I broke the tank.
in yourself.
No, I had that line of alters. Michael and George has a extremely strong telekinetic ability that I can use in different ways. I can close it in on myself, and it acts like superhuman strength. I had someone introduce themselves. The past interviews, what I talked about, the blonde hair girl. I call her Kat. That's not her real name here, but she found me and introduced herself to me.
Cool.
And she introduced herself with the question, do you remember getting angry one time and grabbing a car and launching it into orbit with your bare hands? I'm like, I thought that was just my imagination because I didn't think that was really possible. Like the tank situation, when both Will and Ted both told me that story, I told them both, I'm like, I thought that was in my imagination. I thought I made that up because I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, like I didn't think it was possible to blow up somebody's head.
Or a planet.
Or a planet. And yeah, I was like, okay, I know I did this, but if you guys want to think I'm crazy, that's fine. And then along comes Joseph and you're saying, yeah, you did do that.
You did. You didn't come out unscathed. You melted, but you did it.
Yeah, I melted down. I was
You had to be regened. The goop had to be sloshed into a bucket.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't even want to imagine how painful that was for you.
Oh yeah, it was painful. Yeah.
My memories are you just fall into the ground. Yeah. I have a way of pushing people to do things that they normally don't think they can.
Yeah, except George. We'll get into that.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm not a part of you guys' special little sessions where that you compare memories, and part of me is like, damn, I wish I was there, and another part of me is, I remember too much as it is. Yeah, but I don't remember being a part of that particular program. So if I was, you guys will have to talk to me about it later.
Joseph and I usually work off to the side by together outside of the group when we're doing memory recall. The group has kind of gone away from mission.
Oh, that mission drift happens a lot.
Every single time you create a group for a specific purpose, it moves away from that purpose.
Yeah, that happens every time.
Yeah.
The one group that I still call mine on Facebook, I was founder in my prior profile. I've cherry picked people that I know are real or are providing services for us. It's, I had to do that because the rest of the groups were so full of call it what it is, Penny, bullshitters. People that were there.
Harpers.
People that were there to absorb our energies, and for some unknown reason, they're masochistic enough that they want to be one of us.
I don't want to be one of us.
I don't either. I'm public because I was being shot at. So
I don't even want to have the memories I have.
Yeah.
I wish this never had happened to me.
That's the consensus from those of us who were really there. If you think it's glamorous or something that you want to be a part of, I'm sorry, that's a death wish. It's like wanting to go play in traffic. It's not the smartest thing in the world. And I
have
watched these people that tell me all this stuff. Well, so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that. And I ask them, what do you remember? Well, nothing. Then why are you trying to be public?
Right.
I have this whole list of questions that I give people before I bring them forward. Unless, like Joseph, I saw him on somebody else's show and went, oh God, I know that man.
You.
I have caught so much shit for having you on, and it was because, oh my God, I know that man.
It was
real.
you.
He's real. I don't care what anybody else says. He's real.
I mean, everybody that sees me for the most part keeps getting activated. They definitely don't like it.
I remember when Joseph and I first met and talked to each other on the phone. He asked me, "Do you remember me?" I said, "I want to punch you in the face." And he goes, "Yeah, you remember me?"
I have had to explain to people that Joseph here is not the same person as Joseph out there, and that the guy here is a nice guy, that the guy out there is a son of a bitch.
It's saying it mildly.
So yeah, I mean, come on.
I mean, it was really, he was part of activating my abilities at Montauk.
Mm.
Um,
I don't remember meeting Joseph or any of his alters before we were put on that ship together. And the first thing he saw of me was a Draco kneeling before me just before leaving the ship. And with his feelings about Draco, he immediately hated me. Come on. I can't help it that the OSS pumped me full of Draco DNA. Wasn't my choice. I mean, I was an embryo. Do embryos have choices?
What was amazing to me is having the Draco that served on the ship with us turn around and tell me that I had Draco DNA when I tried to get right before I kicked him off the ship.
You probably did.
Yeah, I was.
he does.
That altar was so pissed.
Probably. But
I have the memory. It flooded through, and he was just like, "What did you just say to me?"
truth is truth, but it's not always something we want to hear. I had a really hard time dealing with that. But that was one of the things that when I had my first regression hypnosis before I was ever public, that was one of the things I asked about, was I kept feeling reptilian. And I have signs and symptoms. And I was like, okay, I need to know what happened. And in my regression hypnosis, it came out that I had been modified by something called military laboratories, which is now part of DARPA. So this
which
was
is
done,
a common thing nowadays.
almost all of us who have been used in the space programs have Draco DNA because
We're modified.
Because they did. We were supposed to go serve with the Germans. The Germans wanted us to like them enough to stay and become colonists. So the agencies here modified us so the Germans wouldn't want us.
I have a feeling that they
they
took people originally, and then they realized what they were doing, and they're like, well, if you're going to take them, we're going to stop you from taking them.
That was it, yes, because the Germans out there want human DNA. They don't want modified.
They don't care what kind of human you are. They just want human.
They knew that I had a Jewish grandmother. They didn't care about that. They knew that I had Native American blood. They didn't care about that. they did care about the Alpha Drac.
Mhm.
They were more than happy to have me replace a Draconian on the ship, because I could run the ship just like the Draconian could.
Mhm.
But they didn't want me in their gene pool. And that's something I keep coming up against these prejudices from World War II. They won't listen to what the Germans out there are really like because they're so full of propaganda from World War II. And you think about it, that was almost 100 years ago. Why are we?
I have had to deal with people here in the States. There's a few people that still refer to the Germans in Germany right now who hadn't even been born yet as Nazis. And I'm like, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
They hate that past. They want nothing to do with it.
It's like calling somebody from Alabama a Confederate.
Right.
It's stupid. I mean, seriously, that was a political party that lasted approximately 20 years.
Correct.
It's done. It's gone.
That political party does not exist anymore. All members of that political party are dead.
Well, maybe.
There were a lot of them at Montauk, at least the scientists.
Yeah, there were a lot of them that were brought to the United States in Operation Paperclip.
Most of Operation Paperclip were that, but
actually they weren't. They were overlapping between that political party and Jesuits.
Okay.
The ones that came to America.
Yeah. All I remember is from the Phoenix Project is that they had Nazi scientists there, and they were racist as fuck.
I remember German crosses and swastikas
And they did not,
on the walls.
Yeah, they did not even like Jewish people there at all. And it's awkward because I have memories of Larry James, the guy that calls himself Larry James. That's not his real name, but the guy that came out publicly and calls himself Larry James, I remember what he was talking about. Like, he did run the trip chair. He was the guy that was in there that put the kids in, that would stand there while the kids were being put in the chair.
I don't know him. Is he somebody I should interview?
He's never shown his face. He's only done, I think, 2 interviews. If you listen to his interviews,
I've had people on that were fake name and totally blacked out, just their name on the screen. If I know they're legit, I'll have them on anyway.
He lies on camera.
Okay.
What this guy did is he sat there when the guinea pigs took over. He got really scared.
I'll bet.
And he decided that because he was the one who I had sending back Albilik and Preston and Cameron, he's the guy who was sending them back. And he's the one who helped put Albilik in a different body and send him back in time to the family that he ended up living with. Okay. And because he knew how to do that, he wanted to get out of there. So got rid of his original body, set whatever the equipment was, he set it up and exchanged his soul from that body into another body that was already dead. And
so did he reanimate the body or did he just die?
The technology did.
The technology did. Whatever tech that we had there, he was able to take over a whole nother person's body that was younger, and then he left.
He was able to do a full permanent transfer.
Because whatever the situation was, the body that he took over was of a Jewish man, and the Nazi scientists that were there didn't want to work with them after that.
That doesn't surprise me.
And they were pissed. I even remember, because I remember finding it out and having to go down there and be like, what are we supposed to do? And they were like, you know, they basically were
Those
like,
guys were all like that. It was different for the people who lived in occupied Germany. They learned really quick, being occupied by American soldiers of all races, that they had to submit. So whether they liked it or not, they learned they had to get along and work with people they wouldn't necessarily have. And there were so few men left in their country after the war that they were literally importing people from Turkey to do the work. And so the nation of Germany is so different now than what it was even at the tail end of World War II. People in America are clueless.
From what we've found is that we played a part in things that happened in World War II, but Montauk never changed World War II. We did change the outcome of the Civil War. That changed because of Montauk. And I have memories going back in time to the Roman Empire on both sides, fighting for both sides. We had a chair that was there. Hold on. Because I've gone through and like remembered different things and went through to find out what sub-levels they were on and stuff. So we had the trip chair and the feeding room were on sub-level 8. We had black Rottweilers on sub-level 5. So like if kids escaped, we would track them down. We'd run them down. We had a training chair was on sub-level 4. So you could be put into this chair and they would put this visor equipment over your head, and it was a white room. Okay. And you would just sit there in this chair and it would basically feed training, like basically training into your irises. And you would learn these fighting styles. So you got to learn how to fight like a Roman soldier. You got to learn how to fight either a Viking or whatever situation we're being put in, we could actually just automatically train. I don't quite know at what point we got that equipment, but I just remember that Larry James, the guy that calls himself Larry James, he talked about, not that specifically, but he talked about being taken back in time to the Roman Empire. And we did alter that to see what would be the outcomes of things. We were there on the ground and we would go in there and like, depending on what side we fought for, and we were always told, do not outdo yourself. You know, and I even remember being there and like killing a bunch of people around me by myself. And a bunch of people, when we went to sit at the campfire, were like, yeah, did you see so-and-so? And like, we were taught not to do that. And I remember like accidentally doing that because I almost died. You know, had I not just stepped up and started slaughtering these people. And I think it was like 5 guys. There was 5 guys with like pretty massive dudes with swords, and they almost killed me, and I ended up having to take them out.
I have a
and after that, I couldn't do that.
When you're back on one of those missions and are you in you or are you in somebody else like you were when you were at the Seattle place?
To my knowledge, I remember being myself, but we had to, depending on what group we were with, we either had to have a clean shaved face. Like if we were, like I remember when I was a Roman soldier, we would have to shave our faces clean. But when we were with the other side, we had to grow our beards out. I don't remember jumping into people's bodies around that time. But I know that later on, after we had taken over, we delved into the trip chair as deep as we could go with whatever we could get away with that equipment.
Okay. Because I was wondering what would happen if you had gotten killed in the battle, which is always a possibility when you're going into combat. Would you have been dead, or would, if you had been in someone else's body, obviously they would have been.
We were in clone bodies.
Yeah.
But what about dying in the past?
I don't know how that works. I don't remember exactly.
That would be interesting. I don't remember dying on most of my missions.
Right.
And I think if you did die, they more than likely we went back. If you were important enough, we would go back and grab the body and bring it back, grab the clone body.
I don't know how the soul part worked, how they retrieved or what they did there, or if it was able to go through time and slingshot back to its original body. I don't remember.
Now, well, I know from my experience as the altar that I called Starbuck, the one that served with Herr Mayor, I was killed twice during that 20 and back, and the altar came back to me here in the here and now, and was here for 36 hours, and they would show up and come get her again and put her in a new body. And when she finally finished the time, the clone was killed. But because Herr Mayor did it, instead of putting me through the proper channels, I had full memory. That's why I have full memory and he doesn't, is because he was sent back through the proper channels.
Well, I do know, like, the other stuff is like the cafeteria that was at Montauk. That's on sub-level 2. The stripper pole and musical equipment was on sub-level 1. The director's office, the AI, and the training room was on sub-level 11 at this point. So there's still like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sub-levels that I haven't been able to get through a lot of stuff. But it's been pretty interesting having to delve into the stuff. And there's certain false memories I've had. Like I saw an interview with Preston where he mentioned the Hale Bob comment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had memory come up of it, and it freaked me out because it was like, at first I thought it was like, okay, I remembered being teleported to the Hale Bob comment, and then he said that there was a ship there, which in the false memory, I saw a ship there behind the comet, but there was different
So that
individuals.
quote was correct. There wasn't. No, there
wasn't. He had fake memory implanted by Jimmy. So Jimmy did erase his memories and put them back. But basically, he had the codes to get into that room. He had the wherewithal to use that equipment that was in the room. And what we had done, what he was correct on, is we did take that comet and teleport that comet from one area to another, because the trajectory was going to hit us.
Okay.
And there was a piece of tech that was Draco tech that was on top of that comet. I don't know per se what they were using it for, but I do remember teleporting there, having real memory of teleporting there and fighting some warrior Dracos and stealing that tech because that's what the AI wanted. So the AI wanted that tech, and that technology also allowed us. Jimmy ended up getting a hold of it, realizing what it was, what you could do with it, and kept Preston there for about 2 or 3 weeks to run that equipment. And I brought people that served in Montauk, served in the base with me, into that room, and stripped pieces of themselves off to strengthen myself energetically. But that's not what the tech was specifically used for. It left them drained, like not extremely, but basically like they could feel that they weren't as whole as they were when they went in there. And then a bunch of the people that were there were pissed because Preston was there. So I had to have him removed. And he mentioned the Zardanian order, which he thought was humans from the future, some like kind of fascist military group, but that's not the case. They're an alien group that's not even from this planet. And I remember Jimmy, like basically I found out that Jimmy pissed them off, the Zardanian order, but it had nothing to do with the Hellbob comet. And we never destroyed the ship that was behind the Hellbob comet because there wasn't a ship there. So I've had to deal with that, you know, and I'm having to figure out how to undo that as well, you know. But from 1985, I think it was when I took over, but I was working under the AI until 1996 is when we transferred that AI to the Cheyenne Mountain facility. And after that, I basically ran the program from then on up until the point of 2014, which I was like, my clone body, my alter that was Jimmy that was in that clone body was like 52 at the time when they got removed from that base. The other thing that we've come through was when me and George were in the feeding room, where I had remembered what I had remembered was slight false memories, where I got brought where I thought that a Draco came to me and told me about the Draco trying to take the base over. That didn't happen. What happened is that Jimmy decided that he was tired of feeding these fucking Draco because they continuously wanted humans, and he didn't want to do it anymore. And we did go in there and we killed basically every Draco that was on that base.
That's not easy to do.
Yeah. Well, it was like, it so happened that they were all in the feeding room. Some were cloaked, others weren't. And we used heavy weapons.
We used 50 caliber machine guns on
That might
basically
do
these
it, yeah.
chest. There was these chest rig harnesses that had an arm that allowed you to, you know, stabilize the weapon on full auto. And we had a bunch of guys with these 50 caliber machine guns that you'd normally see on like a Humvee or something.
Yeah.
Holding them.
My uncle used to have a 50 caliber weapon, and he was doing that out of his apartment, and my aunt, his wife, comes up to him one day, and she has this very childlike way of expressing herself, and she would just say, "Hon, what are we doing here?" And he told me that he looked at her innocent face and heard the concern in her voice, and it just broke. Suddenly he didn't need it anymore.
But it was
Yes, I come from one of those families.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting having that memory because basically what had happened was is George had walked in and the feeding room had changed since I was there because I was brought into the Phoenix Project at Montauk in 1970.
Okay.
So were a lot of people that I remember. Some people weren't, some people were. And
And
then
what year were you born here?
I was born in 1988.
So public, time travel is involved in their being in this program.
Yeah, I was taken at the age of 8 from the point I was 8 years old back in time to 1970, and I served from that point up until 2014, which shouldn't have happened had I not taken over the project in 1985. And then, you know, once I fully took over after the AI was gone, normally that wouldn't have even occurred.
So did you know Stuart Swerdlow?
Yeah. They used to put him in the chair. He was the one who would he would be in the chair and he would open the portals and they would bring children through. Because he was really good in the chair, from what I remember. And they would bring kids through the portals, like not like how they did with other kids. So it's like we would pay people to grab the kids off the streets.
Yeah.
There were specific psychics that were part of the breeding program that they went and specifically took
Okay.
from homes. There were some that had psychic abilities that were a part of kids that were being drug off the streets. You know, and what would happen is you would still be put with all the rest of the kids in the cages in the original location that they showed in that walkthrough that Preston did.
Yeah. I'm going to put the link to that in the comments when I upload this.
And what would happen is that was like our input, you know, like the place we started was in that bunker, and we would be in those cages, and then they would take us out of those cages and they would bring us into the side room, and there was this thing that they put over your head, and you would like leave your mind would be like transferred through like this computer thing and then put back into your head, and then you would be taken into this other room.
Explain that.
There was like they put like these electrode things on your head, and it was like right when they brought you in, and then it felt like you were being ran through, like ripped out of your body and then transferred through this device and then shoved back into your body, and it made you feel disoriented and like kind of dislocated in a sense. So I don't know if they were ripping our souls out, if this device was ripping our souls out and then implanting it back in to give us some form of disassociation. But I remember that happening, and then they did sit us in a room with a bunch of other kids where we had to watch this screen, and it was like telling us how what we were doing was great, and we
Propaganda.
would be, yeah, they were showing us propaganda, and it was like on it was a projector, yeah, on the wall, and like they had this white thing they pulled down and they started it, and it was like trying to make us think that we were doing something good, and we would be it'd be like a classroom, and we would be told to shut our mouths and watch, and we would just sit there and watch, and it would play this crap. And then from there I remember like they would take us into a different area where they put us back in cages, and that's when they would start pulling us and throwing us into the chair. But before they did that, they would take us and Al Bielek. I remember Al Bielek standing there, and he talked about it in one of his interviews, which is what brought memory of it back. He would stand there and use his psychic abilities to be like, go through, and he'd be like, no, 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 Yes. And the kids that weren't psychic, they didn't get thrown in chairs. They got fed to the Draco. And that's what we got told, from what I remember, is if you're not psychic, you're going to get fed to the Draco. Like, and I just remember being a kid and him picking me wanting to be picked. That's how scared I was. You know, because it was like you weren't going to live if you didn't get picked. Later on, when I got older, they would have this yellow bus, and we would take this yellow bus, and that's why so many people remember the tower, because we would go from that area and be transported on the yellow bus up to the Montauk facility, the Camp Hero facility, and then there would be a side area that would go into the underground base. And I once I reached a certain age, they would send me and they would send me and a few others, and we would drive down to go pick up the kids after they had been processed. And the people that we would get, even before they would be processed, we would go down there. It would be a two-way situation. We would go down there to pay these guys that they were dressed like bikers, but they drove a white van, and they had all these kids that were dirty, and they were in dog cages in the back of the white van. And we would pay them. These people were real people that were kidnapping kids on purpose, and they weren't working for us. They were working for us to get paid, but they were doing it willfully.
Yeah. They were traffickers.
They were
Yes.
child traffickers. And there was a time where I got jumped, basically, because they wanted more money. And I remember I was by myself, and I think I was like 17 maybe. And they jumped me. They got me off guard. And they were like, bring us more fucking money now. You know, there were some pretty hardcore guys. And because I was outnumbered the way I was, because there wasn't just one or two, I beelined it back to the base and went to Preston and told him about it. He handed me a bar of Nazi gold. And I went back, and he was like, here. And I went back and I showed it to him. I think I talked about it last time. They basically were like, what the fuck is this? We don't want this shit. I was like, it's gold, it's money, you know? And I'm like, the morals of these people is just outrageous. Like, and I remember the unit that went with me, and one of the people that was in that unit remembered after he watched the interview. He went back with me, and the next time they showed up, and we jumped them. You know, and I had them fucking come out of the wooded area, armed, and we grabbed them up, and we scared the living shit out of them, and told them we were going to feed them to the Draco that were there. We took them to the underground base, and we showed them the Draco, and they fucking pissed themselves, and they never came back again. But yeah, we would drag the kids out of the cages, and we would put them in the other cages that were there. And then while we were there, it was a two-way situation. We would take the kids that were processed and load them up on a yellow bus and drive the yellow bus up. Originally, it was Preston that I remember doing it, and then he had me do it.
So that explains why I have heard from viewers that Preston drove the yellow bus.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the photo that I have on the group that I created, the open group, that photo, that was the building that we would walk the kids down the flight of stairs when we brought them in.
Yeah, all of us have a lot to live with.
Yeah.
So let's change the subject back to Cheyenne Mountain for a bit, if we could.
All right.
So you were there for 17 years as
Yeah.
Michael.
As Michael. I don't remember a whole lot yet. This is new recall. The first memory was literally of walking up to the mountain side with the big hole. And as we inquired more, we started getting more, and then suddenly figured out that it was Cheyenne Mountain. And then, you know, at first we were remembering the gate, the going to other planets, the big, you know, bubble that we would walk through. And when I suddenly realized that what I was looking at on the outside was Cheyenne Mountain, suddenly that TV series popped in my head. I'm like, oh shit, that was actual disclosure.
Yeah. If they have a TV show about it and you have memories, then they can always say, well, you just watch TV.
Right. Ah,
Especially since they used real terminology. Now, I don't remember there being a two-part species out there with a host with a symbiont.
I don't either.
So that particular species is, I don't know, it was in Stargate, it was in Star Trek. And there are noises about that happening with some of the elites.
It's possible. I just don't remember. There's too much soft disclosure regarding that subject for it to possibly not existed. But I don't remember it at this time.
I don't remember encountering them. I remember various insects that were intelligent and hive minds. I remember various reptilians that were intelligent and telepathic, but not hive minds. I remember various forms of greys who are usually near humans that have survived nuclear or bioweapons wars. Oh, yeah, that's what happens to humanity when we have a nuclear war, is they turn into greys if they survive at all.
There are aquatic beings that only breathe in water,
Yeah,
that their ships are completely filled with liquid.
yeah. We have historical references to them. That's what the Namo of Mali were aquatic and in a ship with water. Yeah, most of these races, you can find something in Earth's history. A lot of people will call them myths, but at the core of them, it's soft disclosure, if not the absolute truth. I've tracked super soldiers through our history that way. Most of the myths refer to them as demigods or heroes, or what's the other term they use? there's another term that they use for them. But if you go through the history, you'll find that there's a tradition of usually men who were the descendants of a god. They didn't look like their biological fathers. They were taller than normal men. They were usually sterile. They would go crazy and kill their families. That sounds exactly like a lot of the super soldiers today.
Oh, yeah.
And when you reach a certain level of memory, the Omega programming takes over, or the guilt from remembering what you did, which is why it's so important that we be in support groups together, because that's the only way we can make it through this, is to rely on each other.
Right.
We all have done things out there that we're not proud of. We all have done things through altars. Our altars were not taught right from wrong.
Our
So-
altars were taught follow orders no matter what those orders are.
And that death was not an option, that you could not get out of
There was no
it.
escape.
There was no escape from following those orders. And that's what we have to live with, is the results of that, because our earth cover altar knows right from wrong. So remembering what those other altars did is the problem. And so I don't understand why people out there in the public think it's such a cool thing to be.
It's
And
to the real people, it's extremely traumatizing, to the point of you will disassociate from people.
I tend to dissociate to do the show.
Right.
I'll be honest about it. Otherwise, I couldn't. The topics are too personal, too traumatizing, and that's how I get through it. Otherwise, I'd go the first 10 minutes and I'd be a melted, weepy mess and just cry for the rest of the time. And I mean,
I tend to be in disassociation all the time, not just for the show.
I was like that before.
It's just the way I am.
I lived most of my life in dissociation. I really did. And I got to where my memories were restored. And the only way I was going to get through it was to feel my way through it. And with dissociation, you don't feel. And
Right.
I had been on Prozac and had come off it 6 months before my memories were activated. So I was having to feel all of it and feel my way through this memory dump. And over that, I spent 3 years sorting through the memories before I went public. So you guys have been going through your memory dump in front of a camera. I couldn't have done that. I have the utmost respect for both of you. I could not have done what you're doing. I would cry hysterically every day for that first 3 years. And I finally got to where I could dissociate to talk. I had to because I was being shot at. And that's why I went public. Now, why do I stay public? Because I don't want this to happen to anybody else's kids. There's nothing we do that cannot be done by consenting adults.
I think part of why I might be dissociating at all times of the day is probably has to do with pain medications I take on a regular basis. I have pain medication that I take every day because my body's falling apart. And one of them is a muscle relaxer that, if you look it up online, it's actually an antipsychotic. Another one is is for nerve pain, because normal pain medicine does not stop nerve pain. And I have a lot of nerve pain, and I have to take this certain medicine that is also an antipsychotic, but it is the only thing that stops nerve pain. And I think the two antipsychotics I take is part of why I dissociate so easily.
I have mentioned before that my second husband fed me arsenic in coffee over a 6-year period. I have reached the point where the effects of that have become so bad that my doctor has taken me off all pain meds.
Wow.
And so my sleep's really messed up because I hurt too much to sleep. And then I will sneak a single aspirin. And then I'll sleep for the next 12 hours because I haven't slept for days. And it's getting to a point where life's not fun anymore.
Definitely. I definitely know that feeling.
So I have talked to both of you about it privately. I'm not going to talk about what my diagnosis is at this time because people send you cures. And at this point, I'm just like,
Or they'll tell you, you're just not Christianly enough, or you don't pray enough, you don't believe enough.
raise your vibe.
Raise your, yeah, I get that one a lot. Just raise your vibe, dude.
Raise your vibe and you'll rise above it.
Those people that say all that shit, all that bullshit, are people that have not experienced the physical pain that people like you or I have go through every single day.
Yeah. Guys, public, people listening. My first husband broke my neck. That was why I had to have spinal fusion last December. My second husband poisoned me for life insurance. That's why I'm having problems now. I was raised on a dairy in this part of my life. I was teaching calves to drink from a bucket when I was 5 years old. The surgeon who did my spinal fusion looks at my MRI and he says, well, somebody started you working way too young. The body remembers it all. Plus, whatever happened to me in space that was in this body, because the different factions do different things. If you're going to the Germans, you are in your real body because their regions, techniques only work on your natural body.
They don't work on clones because they push the consciousness out of the body.
Exactly.
They consider it a foreign entity.
And the Americans only use clones because they don't want to mess with your natural body that's going to come back and live here. So I have done a minimum of 90, 60 and backs with the Germans in this body. And I have 5 alters that work for the CIA that use this body.
I remember being on that planet that we keep going back to, and guiding people through.
So does Herr Mayor.
I remember being on the planet while I actually remember buildings being destroyed by fire, by weapons fire from orbit. And I remember guiding people through a portal.
Yeah.
And that portal led to a ship.
Yeah, the thing with those trips is I've done the 60 and back loop. It's still in progress out there, but that part of me is back, and I know we only got half the people from that planet.
Correct.
Because we reached a point where you can no longer redial. It's like it wears out that spot in space or space-time. It wears out the spot, so you can only go back so many times. And by the time we reached that,
the scar keeps getting more and more scarred, and then you just can't traverse it.
Yeah, when we reached the point that we could no longer go back, we had only rescued half the people. And so that's one of the things that we have to live with too, is we could only rescue half the people. And those people are in the Oort cloud. And our ships are what's coming through the sun that Jaina Colvin Hill is seeing.
And they're being attacked by Solar Warden, the Space Marines, and ICC,
Yeah,
who are currently calling themselves the Alliance.
exactly.
And they're all women and children refugees. They're unarmed, defenseless women and children refugees.
And they're taking them directly to their cyborg factory. And they're getting nice, shiny new metal bodies.
And they're taking the other parts and selling them off too.
Of course. So this is something that has been particularly in my craw, is that these people out there are bragging about their great battles, their great victories against refugee ships.
I've had some of these people yelling at me because when I told them that there were no good guys out there and that what they were doing were killing refugees, they started yelling at me that they were the heroes and that they were killing. They everything that's an enemy out there, they call a Draco. You don't even have to be a reptilian. They call everything that's an enemy that they're attacking a Draco.
That's mind control.
That's brainwashing propaganda. That we do stuff like that here to our militaries through basic training. You're trained to desensitize yourself to the enemy you're told to attack. You're trained to dehumanize them.
Well, I've got news for everybody out there. All of the Germans in the German breakaway civilization are human beings originally from Earth. They do not allow any ET DNA to join their gene pool. Those are humans, just like you, except they speak German. That's it. They're humans. And if you think that they're reptilians, you're out of your fucking mind. We have about 5 minutes more. Is there anything that you guys want to plug before we're off?
Probably nothing that would fit into 5 minutes.
Well, we can go a couple of more. I mean, you know,
I might
we've
save the
got-
rest for another time.
We've got Cowboy Bob going behind me, so, you
I
know.
just want people to know that I'm sorry.
I know you're dealing with the conscience.
And, you know, you can go to the Fractal Weapons page on Facebook if you think that you might have been a part of Montauk, or even if you're not. I try to post as much as I can on there. There's other people's stuff that gets posted on there, but you can just look up what I post or some of the other people. We pretty much track down most of who ran the program, who was overseeing it, who was funding it, from what that I can pull together and stuff. There's different interviews that Preston, Larry, Cameron, and you know, that they did, that I put on there, that are pretty prevalent. So especially the walkthrough of Montauk.
Now, I'm putting that on when I upload this, so people will know that we are talking about something that was 3D real. That's my biggest beef, is that we're talking about 3D real and military related, if not actual military at the time. And people throw religion at me. It's like, this isn't religious, guys. This is real, physical, 3D here, just as real as the computer or phone you're watching this on.
And
I'm starting. Go ahead.
Go back on Cameron Duncan's interviews, the very few that he ever did. He never said that he created Junior. He said that's what people have said.
Okay.
So just remember that, because he didn't. I remember him. I asked him for help to destroy that place, and he cowered out. So, and same thing with Preston. Preston never did any of the crap that he said. He never cut any cords to save anybody. That was all bullshit.
Well, it's what he created in his mind so he could live with what he did. And one of the things that people in the public need to understand is the people who run these programs here and in space all think that what they're doing is important enough to justify what they did to the kids involved. All of these programs are manned by kidnapped children. That's the takeaway. Kidnapped children from all over the world. It's not just American kids. I've talked to people from Canada, people from Australia, and at least half the people that will watch this video are in the former Soviet Union.
There were people that were from France that were there.
Every one of them, it was, even if you don't remember it, every single one of you were raped and tortured and mind fractured. Even if you don't want to remember that happened.
It happened to every one of us. Now, I keep being told that when women talk about that part, that it makes men in the audience think that we want more sex. And
that's sick.
It is. And so I'm letting the audience know that's why I don't talk about it. It's not that it didn't happen. It's that the audience response has been so sickening to me that I just don't want to go there. The point is, this is happening to kidnapped children. And it's all the kids, and the ones that don't meet the criteria are killed. So it could be anyone's kids. And since I know they're looking for a certain bloodline, and we're all so interbred in the United States now, you don't have to be this German looking thing. You don't have to be Scott looking like I am.
I remember Black people in the programs that were just as genetically part of that bloodline as I am.
The owner of Global Enlightenment Radio Network is a Plantagenet, and he's Black.
There you go.
And
Just like the first one of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that served in 2002. He was the first Asian American Army Chief of Staff. He was a Montauk kid.
And he's Japanese, ain't he?
I don't know. I just know that he's Asian American, maybe.
um,
But he was there. This is what people have to understand. This AI has taken over and brainwashed most of our leadership. And it is in one of the most defensible locations in our
On
country.
Earth.
yeah, if it's in Cheyenne Mountain, we're never going to get rid of it.
And I think they have weapons like rockets or some kind of shit there, don't they? Like I think
They have access to nuclear ordnance,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
ballistic missiles,
So this AI is fully capable of defending itself.
defending itself from the entire human race.
So
And yeah, and it was like even with the Hale Bob comment, it wasn't doing it to save us. And it doesn't have our best interest at heart, by the way. Like it was
This is doing it for self-preservation and self expansion.
and not only do these people serve it, but you know, it's just like what's that? The Rothschild family worships this AI.
Along with several other family lines of the bloodline families.
well,
Not all of them, to my knowledge. And even in those families that do, there might be a few that are just going through the motions, just trying to stay alive, but don't agree with it. But
well,
a lot of them do.
We're definitely going to have a part 2 on that point because we're out of time. I want to thank you both for coming. I'm sorry it got so emotional.
I think the audience needed to see that.
I think they did too. That's why I didn't blink him out. Thank you, audience, for listening. And with that, I'll say good evening.